Hello and welcome to Ahval Podcasts, the home of objective, up-to-date and independent reporting on Turkey. Don't forget to follow our reports through social media, on ahvalnews.com or through our mobile app. Let's get started.
Hello, welcome to Ahval Podcasts. I am Hala Akay. Today we want to discuss the release and the rearrest of Turkish author and journalist Ahmet Altan. Altan, who was jailed in 2016, was released earlier this month by a Turkish court after years of legal battle. He is accused of helping a coup attempt in 2016 by criticizing the Turkish government in a television program using telekinesis. Altan enjoyed freedom for only a week. He went back to jail after a court reversed the previous ruling. Today, our guest is someone who had the chance of seeing and interviewing Ahmet Altan during his days of freedom. Our guest is Ansaldo, the Istanbul-based senior correspondent for the Italian daily Repubblica. Welcome and thanks for joining us.
Hello, Hale. Thank you for thanks to you.
May I ask you at the beginning the allegations against Altan, why he has been targeted, and why this legal process has been seen by rights organizations as some sort of psychological torture?
Well, the allegations against Ahmet Altan seems to most of the people outside Turkey, but also many inside the country, as not justified. He was actually accused to have sent some so-called subliminal messages during a program on TV just some days before the coup d'etat of the July 2016 in Istanbul and Ankara. And therefore, as we know, not only him, but his brother Mehmet, professor of economy, and also the senior journalist Nazlı Ilıcak were sent to prison. So he stayed in prison as the others. Mehmet was released some months before the release of Ahmet, and Nazlı Ilıcak was also sent to prison and released the same day of Ahmet Altan. Seems to many people not to be justified, not enough. They stayed in prison for more than 3 years, and they were firstly accused and sentenced for a life sentence, and then for 10 years to spend in prison. So it was, of course, this is a reason not exactly based on judicial fundaments. To all the jurists or legal people who are watching this process from abroad, it seems that the accuses against these writers, all of them, seems to be bizarre, as the same Ahmet Altan told me in a very elegant way. He told me the accuses against me were so bizarre that I found them nearly funny. So I was nearly surprised for these accuses. Of course, we all understand, we observers, we all understand that the main reasons are others. Because of course Ahmet Altan was one of the main opposer of the actual government in the last years in Turkey, and he was the strong man of his newspaper, his daily newspaper Taraf, editor-in-chief, and the paper was accused to be linked and to have received financial resources from the group of Fethullah Gülen, and therefore accuses the principal, the main reasons of his arrest I think, and many of the observers are thinking, that are based on these reasons.
And how was Ahmet Altan when he was outside jail? Did he expect to be rearrested? And what did he say to you when you were interviewing him?
Well, absolutely. He was very clear to me when I had the chance to interview him. When I was in Istanbul, when he came out, when the news of his release came out, I asked to see him. And so I saw him for a couple of hours. And he was, of course, let's say, happy for himself, but not satisfied. Because, of course, he was thinking to, as he told me, to all the people who in an unjustified way are still held in prison. And so many of these people, he said, are innocent. And so he was not completely happy. Therefore, during our meeting, while I interviewed him, he told me very clearly that they can come suddenly while we are talking and take me back to the prison, because he knew perfectly that the judge had still to decide if his release could be only temporary or if he had to go back to prison again. And this happened actually 8 days after.
And did he talk about that trial process, how it went, what happened when he was in jail, his life in jail?
Well, he told me, yes, he said something about his life in jail, about his, not exactly about the motives, not exactly about the government. We didn't explore these issues, which, of course, are discussed every day in TV or in the social media or in the newspapers. We preferred to concentrate much on culture, on literature, because of course Ahmet Altan is a writer. Especially, I have to say that in my country, Italy, is a well-known country. Is a well-known writer. His books, his novels, his essays are translated. People are appreciating him a lot. So we discuss on culture. But of course, I asked him some aspects about his life in prison. He told me about his friends in the same prison. He had words of great friendship about the people who are inside, spending this tough time with him. He told me about a young man who is with him and who is a very religious man. And he's a nice musician. He can build some instruments from nothing. I mean, of course, the conditions in a prison are not exactly fair, but from some papers, from some pencils, he can do some instruments and playing them. And so he told me that the whole prison is surprised about what this young man is doing with playing with music. But a part of that, a part of the life in prison, the hardship that that we read also of this life in his own books of Ahmet Altan, we didn't want to talk so much. So we spent the time talking about literature, about being a writer, and I think it was, for the Italian readers and for the European readers who read this interview on La Repubblica, my newspapers, I think it was much more interesting.
Mm-hmm. Maybe I should note here that Altan also wrote a book from prison, which is also published in English. So was he following recently published books in prison? Did he have this chance?
Well, no, we did not concentrate on if he's concentrating on literature, but of course we know, we journalists, we people who are in contact with the situation in Turkey and following it with attention, that he's reading, he's writing a lot. Of course, he knows that many writers many international writers are following his case. There are many Nobel Prizes. I can say that J.M. Coetzee or Herta Müller, or Hampamuk, are following his case, among others, like Ian McEwan, like the Italian Elena Ferrante, or Michael Ondati, and of course Roberto Saviano. So many international intellectuals in the world are following the Ahmet Altan case, and many other of other writers which are in prisons in other places in the world.
So Altan is also a controversial figure in Turkey, and he's not only targeted by the pro-government media or government supporters, but also by the opposition, many people who are angry because they believe that as the editor-in-chief of the Taraf daily, he played an important role in Ergenekon trials, what we name as Ergenekon trials, the arrests of some prominent figures and members of the Turkish military in the last decade over charges of attempting to overthrow the Turkish government. And many people spent years in prison because of those charges, and now they are all released. So when Altan was going back to jail, many celebrated this incident. Many were happy. Have you talked to Altan about his days in Taraf? And as someone, in fact, who has been covering Turkey, what do you think about this attitude against Altan?
Well, I knew that many people were happy about his arrest and are angry with him. Well, it's not my exact attitude to be happy when someone is sent to prison. Of course, someone who has committed crime has to have his condemnation, but I can understand that many people were against Taraf when Taraf was a paper during his years which was very tough against some powers, especially against the military power in Turkey, which is still tough and is still most respected, and so attacking, as his newspaper did, people on top of the army in Turkey was considered something that has not been done before by the Turkish press. In this sense, in many countries, Taraf has been respected as a paper who was able also to go against some powers which were not touched before by the media. I'm not saying here that these reasons were good or not. He had, of course, his motives, documentations, papers. I'm not judging this. But of course, it's important that the powers are judged by the media, the professions of by the journalists, by the people who are able to judge if a document is good or not, or is a news or not, or is something that has been good to go to the readers or not. And this is the salt of democracy. This is the reason of our profession. And I think that in many aspects, Taraf has done his work as a newspaper. And this has not been done before by many Turkish media, especially if we are watching the situation today. So there were so many good journalists in the Turkish media, people who were also killed, arrested. The history of Turkish media is full of wonderful journalists. I think that we had to have respect for the people who are making a good profession. We are talking now about literature or journalism, but this is also valid for other professions like a worker, like a doctor, or like a lawyer, let's say so.
Mm-hmm. And finally, what are your expectations about the future of that case? Do you think that he may soon be released again, or do you think that he will spend years in prison after that short release?
I met a man who is very strong, is also very nice, who is loyal to friendship, loyal to his family, loyal to his profession, loyal to democracy. So I found the accuse against him not sustainable. As Orhan Pamuk said and wrote just after his second arrest. So my hope is that not only him, but also that many innocent people who are held in prison can be judged in a fair way, and if they have not committed crime, of course they should be brought out.
Mr. Ansaldo, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you to you.
And thanks everyone for listening to us. Goodbye.